Thank you so much for tuning in. You can use these chapters to skip to any section of the video. We all know that the brush tool can paint, but did you know that if you hold the Shift key and try to draw a line, it draws straight lines, no matter how squiggly you get. If you start brushing and then hold the Shift key and try to draw a horizontal or a vertical line, it does it perfectly. But do keep in mind, it only does horizontal and vertical lines. However, if you make a point, like point A, let's dab. Hold the Shift key, dab point B, it makes a straight line throughout. Also, if you keep holding the Shift key and then just dab, it creates connected lines. This is not just limited to the brush tool. Any tool that is brush-based, you can apply it. Let's say in this image, there are some distractions we need to get rid of. And there is this line right here. So even with the remove tool, which is just like a brush, you can just dab on one end. You want to make sure remove after each stroke is unchecked so that you can work with it. And then hold the Shift key, dab on the other end. Now you have a straight line. Let's apply it by pressing this button. And there you go. It looks perfect. In the real world that we live in, a brush tool can just paint. But in Photoshop, the brush tool can be a lot of things. It can be scissors to cut out stuff. So here we have a new background. Let's turn it on. On top of that, we have our subject masked out. As you can see, the mask is not perfect. If you zoom in right here, this area, it didn't get it right using select subject. So if we select the mask, pick the brush right here, we can make the brush a little smaller and just paint this area in black to hide it. As simple as that. Let us choose a soft round brush and then let's hide this area. See, we are cutting out stuff with the brush tool. Similarly, we can bring things back. We learned it in the masking lesson, which you can watch right here. We can go to this area. It didn't get the bag right, so we can paint in white. So you can press X to toggle between the foreground and the background colors. White shows and black hides, remember? And you can just simply bring it back. No big deal. So we are doing cutouts using the brush tool. So the brush tool can also be a scissor. The brush tool can also be a chemical that creates effects. So here we have the brush tool selected. If we change the blend mode of the brush to difference right here and choose white as the foreground color. Now the difference between white and white is what? Black, because there is no difference. We painted it. Nothing out of the ordinary. Let's paint over it again. It's painting the difference. Let's paint over it again. And you keep on painting to create some wonderful, wonderful effects. And you can use this possibly as a background if you wish to. You can also experiment with different colors. So right now, this is what we get. And then you can change the color to something like red and paint over it to create some fantastic effects. You can try different brushes and you can also use it as a background, which we have covered in this video. You can also use the brush tool for advanced techniques like dodging and burning. So here we have just a simple gray layer. We changed its blend mode to soft light, painted some areas with white and some areas with black. That's just it. But have a look at the result. Here is the before and here is the after. All with the brush tool. So as you saw, the brush tool in Photoshop is not just merely for painting. It can be many things. And in this lesson, we will learn how the brush tool works and how can you make the most of it so that you can apply it all throughout everything that you do in Photoshop. And by the end of this video, you're going to be a master. So without any further ado, let's get started. Before we start, the most important reminder, the shortcut to the brush tool is B. B for brush. That's how you remember it. Any tool you're in. If you want to get back to the brush tool, you press B. Or you can select the brush tool from right here. Up to you. Now, before we delve deep into the magic of brushes, let us do some housekeeping. First of all, when you do select the brush tool, you will get the option to select different types of brushes right here. Inside of this, you will have different groups, which if you open, you'll find different kinds of brushes. If you don't see any of this, let me share with you how to reset it. First of all, let me delete all of these. All right, so now I don't have my default brushes. By the way, these are the brushes that I created and installed. All you have to do is to click on the gear icon right there and then click on Append Default Brushes. Hit OK, and all your default brushes will show up if they were not showing up already, and that is General, dry, wet, special effects. I'm going to bring these at the bottom, so default is at the top. Sometimes when you're brushing, you might wonder, where did my circle go? So right now the circle is showing up, but it's gone. Where did that go? By the way, when you're working with brushes, you want to make sure that if you have worked with blend modes before, you change it back to normal. Otherwise, weird stuff will happen. So right now my brush has changed to a crosshair. I want the regular version back. Just make sure that your caps lock is not activated. Once you turn off caps lock, see, you have the regular brush back. Now there is a purpose for this, which we will cover later in the video. Now when you do pick your brushes and you do want to see the brush tip, you can turn it on. Right now, you see how the brushes would paint if you paint it this way. You can go to the settings and then you can check brush tip. It will also show you the tip of the brush, which basically means what would the brush paint like if you just dab like this. That's the brush tip. So first of all, let's talk about the 4 fundamental properties of a brush. The first one being size. So how do you control the size of the brush? If you're getting paid by the hour, click here and then you can control the size using this slider. But if you want to work quicker, there are a couple of shortcuts. The first one is using bracket keys. So right bracket key to make it larger and the left bracket key to make it smaller. By the way, I do recommend changing your shortcuts from the bracket keys to W and E if you don't have any use for W and E in Photoshop. That way, you don't have to lift your hand and go to the other section of the keyboard. Usually, our hand is on the left-hand side so that we can press Ctrl or Command Z, Ctrl or Command C, Ctrl or Command V, Shift, and all of that. Everything is on the left-hand side. So it's more convenient to change your brush size shortcuts to W and E so that you don't have to lift your hand and do the whole thing over and over again. So how do you do that? You go to Edit and then Keyboard Shortcuts. Click on this drop down and you want to make sure Tools is selected. Scroll down, you will find a shortcut for Decrease Brush Size. There you go, Decrease Brush Size. By default, it would be bracket keys, this one and this one, right? You just have to click on it and change it to W, press W, and increase it for E. That's it. Accept it. Some errors might show up. Just accept it. It is for replacing the previous shortcuts for W and E. Hit OK. And at any time, you can reset everything to defaults by clicking on this drop down and choosing Photoshop defaults. I don't want that. So I'm going to hit OK right here. So it's more convenient that way. Another shortcut to control the size is pressing Control and Option on a Mac and then dragging it right and left to increase and decrease the size. On a Windows, you hold the Alt key or the Option key and the right mouse button, drag it right and left to control the size. The next property is hardness. It controls how sharp the edges of the brush are. So right now, this is a soft brush. If I go ahead and increase the hardness, by clicking on this arrow right here, you can increase the hardness from right here. And now this is not so soft brush. If I increase the hardness all the way high, there you go, very sharp brush. By the way, you might notice there are some bumps in the brush. Why? Because there is less spacing in it. What does that mean? We're going to cover it later in the video, but for now, you can go to Window and Brush Settings. So here you have the spacing. Decrease the spacing. And now you have a smoother brush. That's all. But by default, if you choose the soft brush, not enough spacing is required in a soft brush because it's soft already. And in a hard brush, by default, automatically the spacing is less. So you don't have to worry about any of that right now, but if you ever come across issues like this, you know why it is happening. Now, what is the shortcut for hardness? Similarly, on a Mac, hold the Control and Option, and if you drag it up, it would be soft. If you drag it down, it would be hard. You get to see a preview of that as well. On a Windows, Alt and the right mouse button, same, drag it up or down. Side note, I've configured my tablet in such a way that all I have to do is to press this button on the pen and then drag it right, left, up, down to control all those settings, size and hardness. And if you want to learn how to set your tablet up, there is a video on that as well. The next one is opacity. Just like the layers, the brush can have opacity too. So once you select the brush, at the top you'll see opacity. Let's decrease the opacity to about 20%. This is a less opaque brush. Let's increase the opacity a little higher. This is 63. More opaque brush. Or in other words, you can say The higher the opacity, the less the transparency. Now, is there a shortcut for opacity? Of course there is. If you have the brush tool selected, and then if you press 1, the opacity is 10. If you press 5, it's 50. If you press 8, it's 80. And if you press 0, it's 100. There you go. 100, 40, 10. You get the gist of it. Now there's one more thing which looks like opacity, but it isn't, and that is flow. If we decrease the flow to about 10%, the intensity is low. If we increase the flow, the intensity is high. It looks like opacity, but what is the difference? By the way, the shortcut to controlling the flow is very similar to opacity. Just hold the Shift key, and then if you press 3, it's 30. Hold the Shift, 6, 60. Hold the Shift, 8, 80. Now flow is changing if you hold the Shift key. If you don't hold the Shift key, opacity will change. Now what is the difference? Opacity is like every time you paint, it's like placing a sheet of paper with that level of transparency. So if the opacity, let's say, is 20%, and if I paint, it's simply a sheet of paper which is this transparent. If I paint over it again, it's a sheet of paper on top of it with this level of transparency. If I paint over it again, this is again like a sheet of paper with this level of transparency. It is just like creating layers with opacity 20, one on top of the other. That's opacity in a brush. However, flow is different. Let's increase the opacity to 100 and decrease the flow to 10%. Working with flow is just like a real brush. Imagine a sketch pen which is a bit dried up to the level of 10%. You start painting, and as you can see, the intensity is not as high. But as you continue painting over an area over and over again, the intensity accumulates. You don't have to lift off your brush or lift off your mouse and then paint again to place a sheet of paper, just as we did in opacity, but this is like the intensity of the brush. Let's decrease the flow to 2% to see it clearly. So this is low intensity, but I can continue painting on the same area and the intensity increases, just like a real brush, as opposed to opacity, where if the opacity is like 10%, if I continue to paint in an area, it wouldn't increase the intensity. Why? Because it's just like placing a sheet of paper. I have to place another sheet of paper to make it more opaque. Now this section might convince you to buy a tablet. By the way, if you're interested in what tablet I'm using or what I recommend for different budgets, you can check the links in the description. Because we're going to be talking about pressure sensitivity. When you're using the mouse to paint something, you just have two signals. Either it is on or off. That is just it. But with a tablet, you have different levels of pressure. So right now, I'm pressing very softly, so the brush is small. Now I'm increasing my pressure and the brush is becoming bigger and bigger. So right in here, the pen pressure controls the size of the brush. But if you go to Window and Brush Settings, we're going to discuss all of these advanced settings later. But for right now, if you go to Shape Dynamics, you will notice that the size of the brush is set to pen pressure. If we turn it off, you will notice that the pen pressure no more controls the size. If you go to Transfer instead, let's turn it off, go to Transfer, turn it on, you can set the opacity and the flow to pen pressure. So right now, if we press softly, the opacity and the flow is low. As we press harder, the opacity and the flow increases, and so does the intensity of the brush. Now coming back to the question, what is the purpose of the crosshair? It becomes important especially when you're using pen pressure. So let us choose a brush that is hard around pressure size, where the pressure controls the size. It is just an easy preset. Let's say we paint a cursive S right here. Now we need to connect something right here. But if we try to paint, we will miss the center point. Let's try one more time. Try to keep it in the center. If we are fast, we are missing the center point. We want to start exactly where it ends. And that is where crosshair is important, so that we can figure out where the center is. Press caps lock. The brush cursor changes to a crosshair. Now you can see exactly where the center is and start directly from there. It's a bit shabby, I'm sorry about that, but that's the use case of it. And after you're done, do not forget to turn off caps lock, otherwise we can be confused and our text will be screaming at everybody. Now, I'm not a professional artist when it comes to handling brushes, so how did I end up writing this decently? Well, I used a cheat code, and that cheat code, my friend, is smoothing. So how does that work? Let's turn off this layer. Let's write it one more time. Press caps lock so that it's easy for us. And right now, whatever I paint, if we decrease the smoothing, whatever I paint is happening instantaneously, just exactly the way you paint it. So let's say we write something like beautiful right here. Even a little mistake will show up. So even if I made a little squiggly line right here, even if my hand moved, it will not smooth it out. All right. Now let's create a brand new layer. And this time, let's increase the smoothing all the way to 100. It gives you a little lag and smooths out the irregularities. So now when you write in beautiful, you get a lot more time to play with it. Look at the smoothness. This is beautiful. Now, just as a bonus to place it on the paper, let's use some blend modes. Let's place it right here, make it a bit straight, just like this. And now let's change the blend mode from normal to multiply, because multiply is blend mode which darkens. Now double click on the right hand side of the layer. We want to take away the bright areas of the underlying layer from this current layer. If none of this makes sense, you can use this lesson on blend if. So let's do it like this. This is too harsh, so hold the Alt key or the Option key, click on the slider to break it apart, and break it apart just like this. Now this color is not fitting so nicely in here, so you can check color overlay right here and change the color to whatever you like. Let's make it a bit brighter blue, like this. Something like this is nicer. What do you think? Let's make it this color. That is more realistic. There you go. I like it. Hit OK again. And done. There's another very important shortcut if you want to use the same brush as the eraser. So as you're painting, if you want to erase it, of course you can select the eraser tool and erase parts of it. Or if the brush tool is selected, you can just press the tilde key, the key next to 1, on the left of 1 on your keyboard. As you hold it, your brush tool is still selected, but it changes to the eraser. So now you can erase stuff. As soon as you let go of the tilde key, you can paint again. Hold it to erase it, let go to paint again. Now, how do you create your own brush? The concept is pretty simple. Whatever area you want as the brush tip, those areas need to be black, and the rest of the areas need to be white. Let me illustrate. So if I just paint randomly, so here's a random white blank document. I paint randomly with black like this, and some other areas as well, just to share with you the selection criterias. Now, if we make a selection of this one, and then if we go to Edit, Define Brush Preset, that will be turned to a brush. Now, keep in mind, it's a brush tip. Your brush wouldn't paint like that. Anyway, this is just a test. Let's name it Test. Hit OK. Now, this is a brush. Let's go back. Now, if you dab, it will paint it that way. You can change the color to whatever you like. There you go. It is your brush. Now, if you continuously paint with this, it paints something like that, and we'll go to advanced settings later. But that's how you turn something into a brush. Just make sure that the area that you want to turn into a brush, that is in black, and the area that you don't want in the brush, that is in white. For a little more advanced example, I'm going to place my logo in here. Now, my logo is in absolute white. If you just keep this layer on, have a look, white with a transparent background. We need to paint it in black. So for it, we're going to create a solid color adjustment layer, change it to black, hit OK. Hold the Alt key or the Option key and click on the line between these two layers so that this color is clipped to this logo layer. Now you can select it all by pressing Ctrl or Command A since there's nothing else, or you can also make a selection of this area. Doesn't really matter. There is nothing else that you need to be careful of. Select it all by pressing Ctrl or Command A, then go to Edit, Define Brush Preset. It will consider just that area. And let's name this PiXimperfect. Fine. Press Ctrl or Command D. Now you have that brush and we can stamp it wherever we want. So right in here, this is a photo that I took. I want my logo and stuff here. So let's change the color to white. You can always press X to toggle between the foreground and the background colors. And let's just dab right here. There you go. we painted with our brush. You can make it larger, you can make it smaller, just like a regular brush. Makes the process super convenient, and you will be able to find your brush right here. This is your PiXimperfect brush. You can also put the brushes you created into a group. Select this brush, hold the controller command, select the other one, or if you want to select a series of brushes, select the first one, hold the shift, select the next one in the series, everything will be selected. Just make sure all of them are selected, and then you can right click on it and choose new brush group. And you can group it to whatever you like. Let's name it Pix, click on OK, and now we have a group of brushes. Now how do you turn an image to a brush? Same concept. So here I took a white paper, took a red sketch pen and just wrote this signature. And I want to turn it into a brush. For this to turn into a brush successfully, we want this background to be absolutely white and this one to be absolutely black. For it, you can simply go to Select, Color Range. And with this eyedropper right here, just click on the red. That's it. You can control the fuzziness so that whatever you have selected is in white and the background is black. For me, this is fine. You can select additional areas by clicking on the plus eyedropper. Select this area as well. Everything is now selected. White are the areas that are selected. Black are the areas that are not selected. Hit OK. Now with the selection active, click on the adjustment layer icon and then choose solid color. And as you guessed it right, we're going to choose black, and then simply create a solid color white background. Let's select the layer underneath it because we want to create a layer under this color fill. Now let's create a solid color adjustment layer again and choose white. Everything looks proper. Control or Command A to select it all. Go to Edit, Define Brush Preset. And you can name this Signature. Hit OK. And there you have your signature brush. Let's go to an image. And instead of this, you can also write in your signature. Press D to set the foreground and the background to defaults, X to toggle the colors, and there you go. You have your signature as well. Now, how do you export these brushes or share these brushes for other people to use or maybe for your own backup? For that, just simply select the brushes you want to export. So first one, hold the Shift key, select the last one. Even if it's inside the group, outside the group, it doesn't really matter. You can export with groups. Just select all the brushes. You can also select the groups as well, up to you. And then click on the gear at the top and then go to Export Selected Brushes. Let's name it Pix Test and click on Save. And now if you wanted to bring in these brushes, you can directly open those files or you can go here, Import Brushes, and if we choose Pix Test, click on Open. Pix Test group shows up with all the brushes that we selected. To understand the advanced properties of a brush, let's create an advanced brush. You're gonna love it. First of all, let's go to File, New, and let's create a smaller document. Let's go to Art and Illustration, choose 1000 pixel grid. Click on Create. With the brush tool selected, you wanna make sure you have the soft round brush selected right here. Let's zoom in a bit more. With black as the foreground color, let's create a dust brush. Let's start painting dust particles, a little bit here and there. Now, once you have that finalized, all you have to do is to select that area or select the entire image because there is nothing else. Press Ctrl or Command A to select everything, or you can select that area and then go to Edit, Define Brush Preset. Let's name this Dust. Hit OK. Now it's a dust brush, but does it paint like dust? Let's create a new document, and this time let's create a bigger document, maybe 4000 by 4000 or even 2000 by 2000 will do. You can go to Art and Illustration for this preset, 2000 by 2000 grid, click on Create. And for better visibility, let's create a solid color adjustment layer, choose black, and on top of that, let's create a new layer and change the color to white. Now, if we try to paint with this, does it look like dust? No, it looks like a trail of mosquitoes or something. To make it paint like dust, we're gonna have to use advanced brush properties. For it, let's go to Window and Brush Settings. Let's start with Brush Tip Shape. You get a live preview of how the brush will paint. Like if you paint it like this, how will it show? And it gives you a live preview of the exact same thing. The first setting right here is the size, which you know how to control. Then you have the rotation. Yes, you can rotate your brushes. So you can rotate like this. You see the preview right there? So right now, this is how the brush paints, right? I can rotate it a little bit. This is how it paints. Rotate it a bit more. This is how it paints, right? So it's simply rotating the brush tip. That's it. You can also squish the brush tip. In other words, decreasing the roundness. So right here, if we just squish it, it's squished. There you go. It's super flat. You can open it up This is how it is right now. You can also flip the brush horizontally or vertically. To understand it better, let's get a brush tip that is easier to understand. Of course, you can also select brushes from here as well. So this is our signature brush that we just created. This is how the brush is. If we flip the x-axis, it's flipped horizontally. If we flip the y-axis, it's flipped vertically. Now, spacing, as you guessed it, is the space between each brush tip as you paint. If there is less spacing, it'll be just straight lines. If there is more spacing, there would be more space as you paint. Now it is beginning to look like dust. So let's increase the spacing. You can get a live preview right here. Now here's the shortcut. If you want to rotate the brush at any point, you can also use arrow keys. The right arrow keys will rotate the brush clockwise and the left one will rotate it anti-clockwise. If you want to rotate it faster, just hold the shift key and then press the arrow key to rotate it 15 degrees at a time. So right now angle is 49, right? Let's do it one more time. It's 64. So 15 at a time. Just hold the shift key. You can also keep holding the arrow keys to rotate faster if you wish. And if you're using a graphic tablet, your pen tilt can also control the brush rotation. And that brings us to shape dynamics. Let's go to shape dynamics and turn it on so that these functions are applicable. Now in the angle section, you can set the control to pen tilt. Now have a look. As I tilt the pen, the rotation will change. Have a look. See? As I'm tilting it, so I'm tilting it to the left hand side, rotation is changing, tilting it to the right. See? And that is the advantage you get with a graphic tablet. Recommended ones in the description. Let's turn it off. We don't need it for this one. You can also control the size to pen pressure. So now when I press softly, the size will be smaller. If I press harder, the size will be larger. In addition to that, you can also have random sizes. And that is where jitter comes into the rescue. How random you want the size to be. If you increase the randomness, have a look at the randomness right here. Let's turn the control off so you can see what's happening. So if we make the size jitter absolutely high, the random size variations is absolutely random. It can be extremely small and as large as you have set it. So have a look right here. Sometimes it paints small, sometimes it's larger. So it's the randomness of size. You can also turn up angle jitter so that every tip has a random rotation and a random angle. So now as we paint, this is random dust. If you want the horizontal and vertical flips to also happen randomly, you can check flip X jitter, flip Y jitter. You can also turn up roundness jitter, which controls how random is the squishiness of the brush. And with these options like size jitter and roundness jitter, you also have the option of minimum diameter and minimum roundness so that a random size is not unrealistically extremely small and then we have an extremely huge result. So it maintains a range. So you can set it to about 30%. So a random size will not go below 30% of your brush size. The next one here is transfer. Let's select that. Let's turn that on. Now you can control the opacity with pen pressure. You can control the flow with pen pressure. So let's turn off the flow so you can see what's happening. So if you set the opacity control to pen pressure, we have discussed it before. If we press softly, the opacity is low. If we press harder, the opacity is higher. That's just it. And you can also make it absolutely random too. Let's make the flow random too. I want to turn off pen pressure control because it's random anyway. Now the next one important right here is scattering. Let's select that, turn it on, and you can just scatter it. As you scatter it, have a look. The brush tips get scattered, more scattered, less scattered. You can choose to scatter in both axes. There you go. It's all random, but again, the count is low. You can increase the count right here and now have a look at the dust. It's beginning to look like real awesome dust. I'm going to decrease the brush size. Take a look at it. Take a look at the dust. It's so cool, isn't it? Now the count is too huge and set the scatter to about 154%. That's nicer. Let's create a new layer. Let's play with it. That looks much better than before. And there you go. You can just customize everything about this brush. Now it is important to save this brush with all of these settings. So for it, click on the hamburger menu, go to new brush preset. You want to make sure include tool settings is selected and name it Pix Dust. Hit OK. And now you have this brush saved. If you go to the dust brush that we created before, and if we try to paint, it's nothing. But if we choose the Pix Dust one, have a look at it. It's so much better. Now this is a very versatile brush. You can paint dust with it. You can paint snow with it. Let's try to paint some snow. Let's create a brand new layer by clicking on this button. Select that dust brush, Pix Dust, and let's sample the color of the sky. Hold the Alt key or the Option key. Sample this color right here. Click to sample and just simply start painting. Paint a bit right here. And it's going with it. Have a look at it. It's like it's a part of it. Here's the before, here's the after. It's going with it beautifully. Now time for something fun. And that, my friend, is symmetry. Let's increase the smoothing so that we paint smoothly. And the symmetry icon doesn't need to be explained. So click on it and you can create a vertical symmetry. This is just like a vertical line. You can just resize it. You can rotate it, up to you. So I'm going to keep it this way. And now when you paint, the other side will be a mirror image of the other side. That's all. Let's select a hard round pressure size brush. Select black as the foreground color. And whatever you do, you have a mirror image on the other side. So cool. You can also choose other shapes like dual axis. Now whatever you do is mirrored on all four sides like this. You also have mandala. Mandala, I don't know how to pronounce that. Please correct me in the comments. That a lot of people enjoy a lot. Let's select that. You can choose how many segments you want. Let's choose 5. Hit OK. You have 5 segments. You can rotate it. You can adjust it, right? Hit enter or return. I want to create a black background. Let's choose black. On top of that, let's create a new layer and paint with white. Something like this. Looks fantastic. Now you can change the color to red and maybe do something in here. And then you can do something in the middle. Something in here. And you can go on, and I warn you, this is very addictive. Now, once you're done, turn off the symmetry by clicking here, symmetry off. Otherwise, it will keep painting this way. Now, here's an important setting before we move on to some exciting brushes. Whenever you have any brush selected, whether the size is controlled with pen pressure or not, whatever brush that is, for example, the hard round brush, if we paint with it, the pen pressure does not control the size. Of course, you can make a change in the brush preset, brush settings, but if you turn on this button right here, if this is turned on, the pen pressure will always control the size. Throughout this channel, I have recommended ENVATO Elements subscription. It's a one subscription for unlimited assets, whether it's Photoshop actions, brushes, stock photos, stock videos, sound effects, Premiere Pro templates, everything. However, Adobe also has a free resource of incredible set of brushes created by the legend, the one and only Kyle T. Webster. And you can get it by opening up the brush tool right here, click on this arrow, click on this gear icon right there, and choose Get More Brushes. It takes you to a directory of 1,000 brushes created by the master Kyle T. Webster. Big shout out, check out his work, do follow him on Instagram, amazing work. Now you have new brushes right here. You have watercolor, mega brush, dry media. You can just download all kinds of sets. This is not ending. There's lots and tons and bazillion brushes right here. So let's download the watercolor brushes. Click on download. I have it downloaded right here. I can import it the way we learned before, or you can just double click on it. And if you open up Photoshop, see the watercolor group shows up, and look at the number of brushes. The list is crazy. Please, please, please follow Kyle Webster. He deserves all the applaud right here. Now let's do a creative project with these brushes. Let's create a negative mask by holding the Alt key or the Option key and click on the mask button. Now let's create a solid color adjustment layer and choose white and place it under the subject. Select the mask right here. Let's scroll down and we're going to choose one of these brushes. There's so many, it's hard choosing one. Let's go with this one, select it, and now you want to make sure white is the foreground color. Let's make the brush a little larger and start painting. Start bringing back the subject slowly and gradually. Now we want to bring back the subject a little more than the subject's background. So for it, select the quick selection tool or any of these 3 tools and at the top click on select subject. Now with the selection active, with the mask selected, select the brush again. You can choose a different brush or the same brush, up to you. Let's try this brush and paint more. on the subject. Press Ctrl or Command D once you're satisfied, and this looks marvelous. To make it even better, you can even erase certain areas. Let's open this up. There are these eraser ones. There's the salt one. Let's select that. And I'm going to choose the brush again. And you can bring additional areas back like this, or you can erase it. Create this salt effect. See that? You can choose a different kind of salt. Erase this area a bit, that area a bit. Again, this area. In addition to that, you can also add a gradient background. And on top of that, if you want, you can also add some text. This looks fantastic, but the intensity is not enough. So select the subject layer and then press Ctrl or Command J to make a duplicate. Now, of course, this might seem like too much, so decrease the opacity. Let's set it to about 72%. That seems about right, and there you have your creative graphic. So that's all about the brush tool in Photoshop. There is so much to it, and that is why I recommend checking out these chapters for your reference from time to time. I hope you practice, I hope you experiment, and most of all, I really hope and I want you to have fun. Thank you so much for watching. If this video helped you, make sure to give us a like, and also don't forget to subscribe, and not just subscribe. Ring the bell so that you, my friend, don't miss any other future tips, tricks, or tutorials. I would like to take this moment to thank all of these nice and amazing people for supporting PiXimperfect on Patreon and helping keep PiXimperfect free for everybody forever. Thanks so much again. I'll see you in my next one. Till then, stay tuned and make sure that you keep creating.
We're up here on cloud nine, and somehow we get it right every time.